All right, welcome in, everyone. Ready to dive deep again. Today, we're tackling something that's, well, a pretty big deal if you're anywhere near defense contracting.
Definitely a hot topic.
It's the Department of Defense's Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, or CMMC. And yeah, that's a mouthful, I know. But trust me, it's worth wrapping your head around. We're going straight to the source today, folks. Got the Federal Register publication right here, the proposed rule. It's labeled CMMC.PDF.
Got it.
And then there's some extra guidance in CMMC2.PDF. Think of this deep dive as, I don't know, a cheat sheet, maybe a decoder ring, to help you understand this whole new landscape in defense cybersecurity.
Yeah, it's a big shift, for sure. And it's not just for the big guys, the Lockheed Martins of the world. This impacts anyone even thinking about working with the DoD, subcontractors, even companies who just touch the data. So yeah, stick with us. We'll break it down, make it clear, maybe even have some fun with it.
Fun's always good. So, okay, let's start simple. What exactly is CMMC, and why did the DoD feel the need to create this whole thing?
Right to the point. I like it. Basically, CMMC boils down to verification. They want proof that sensitive but not classified information is being protected correctly. We're talking federal contract information, that's FCI, and controlled unclassified information, or CUI. That's all the data flowing back and forth between the DoD, its contractors, subcontractors, you name it.
So this information was always supposed to be protected, right? I mean, what was so wrong with the old way of doing things that they needed CMMC?
Well, think of it like this. Before, each agency kind of had its own way of handling cybersecurity. So you have this mishmash of different approaches, not always talking to each other, could be a real headache for contractors, right?
Yeah.
And the big concern was it wasn't always working. Information was slipping through the cracks. Sometimes even the flow of information was restricted too much, ironically, because of all the different rules.
Sounds like a recipe for vulnerabilities.
Exactly. So enter Executive Order 13556, which created the CUI program. That was a push for some uniformity across the board, all agencies on the same page, how to manage sensitive information, make sure everyone's handling it right.
Okay, makes sense. But even before CMMC, defense contractors already had cybersecurity rules to follow, right? What were those?
Right. So there was already the DFARS clause 252.204/7012. DFARS is the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement. It's basically the DoD's rule book for buying stuff. And that clause said contractors had to meet NIST SP 800-171. NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. They develop these frameworks for best practices. So 800-171, that's all about protecting CUI, the controlled unclassified information, on systems that aren't part of the federal government. And then you had cloud providers needing to meet FedRAMP Moderate or something similar. That's the government-wide program for cloud security.
Okay, so rules were already there. Why is CMMC such a game changer then?
This is where it gets really interesting. CMMC is all about independent verification. Before, with that DFARS clause, it was mostly self-attestation. Companies just said, yep, we're good, basically. No one was really checking. CMMC changes that. Now you got to have an independent third party come in and make sure you're actually doing what you say you're doing.
So no more trust us, it's show us the receipts.
Exactly. And this is all happening while cyber threats are getting more and more sophisticated, targeting the whole defense supply chain. Those documents we mentioned, they even cite figures from a few years back, 2016, 2017, and the estimated damage from cyber attacks. Billions, with a B. And it's not just the big guys they're after, it's the smaller subcontractors too, the ones with maybe less cybersecurity muscle.
Okay, so CMMC is the answer to this whole unverified high-threat situation. So let's dive into the nuts and bolts of it, shall we? What are the core components of CMMC?
All right, the CMMC model is built on 3 levels. They actually simplified it. It used to be 5.
Oh, interesting. So give us a quick rundown of what each level entails.
Sure thing. Level 1, that's the starting point, the basics. It lines up with FR Clause 52.204/21, the Federal Acquisition Regulation. Think of FAVR as the basic rulebook for all government contracts. This clause is all about basic safeguarding of information systems used by contractors, basically doing the bare minimum cybersecurity.
Gotcha. So what about Level 2?
Level 2, that's where you step it up. This aligns with NIST SP 800-171, Revision 2, that's what we talked about before, the standard for protecting CUI outside the government. Now, here's a little wrinkle. Some companies going for Level 2 can actually do self-assessments with a yearly check-in on SPRS, that's the Supplier Performance Risks System. But for other Level 2 contracts, you got to have a third-party assessment done by a C3PO, a CMMC third-party assessment organization.
So some self-assessment, but not for everyone at Level 2. Okay, and then there's Level 3. I'm guessing that's for the folks handling the really sensitive stuff, right?
You got it. Level 3, that's based on some of the requirements in NIST SP 800-172, which is all about enhanced security for CUI. And the assessments for this level, those are done by the government themselves. So it's like climbing a ladder. Each level gets more intense, more scrutiny, higher stakes.
Okay, that makes sense. So we have the levels, but when does this CMMC thing actually kick in? When will we see it in contracts?
The rollout is happening in phases, 4 of them. Phase 1 starts when they finalize the revised DFARS clause 252.2047021, and then the other phases come in every 6 months to a year after that. So it's a gradual process. They're not just flipping a switch overnight.
Good to know. And how do they decide which CMMC level a certain contract needs?
This is key.
Yeah.
It'll be spelled out right in the contract solicitation what CMMC level you need. And that depends on a few things. What kind of information is involved, how sensitive it is, how critical the project is, things like that. And once a prime contractor wins a contract that requires CMMC, they're on the hook for making sure their subs, the ones handling that data, are also meeting the right CMMC level.
Right, so it flows down the chain. But it's not like every system a contractor has needs to be CMMC compliant, right? Just the ones involved with the specific contract.
Exactly. It's all about what they call scoping. That means figuring out exactly which systems and data related to the contract are handling FCI or CUI. It's like drawing a digital fence around that specific stuff. You might have other systems totally separate. Those might not need to be under CMMC for that particular contract, but getting the scope wrong can lead to problems, so it's got to be done right.
Makes sense. So we've got the levels, the timeline, but who are all the players involved here? You mentioned C3PAOs before. Sounds like a whole new world of organizations popping up around CMMC.
Oh yeah, it's a whole ecosystem. There's the accreditation body, the top dog, officially called the Cyber AB, only one of them at a time. And they call the shots. They authorize and accredit those C3PAOs, the third-party assessment organizations. And they also make sure those C3PAOs are following all the international standards, like ISO IAC 17011 and 17020. Those are the ones that guarantee these assessment bodies are legit and impartial, no funny business.
So the Cyber AB is like the referee, making sure the game's played fair.
That's a good way to put it. And then you've got the C3PAOs themselves, the ones actually doing the level 2 assessments. They have to be approved by the Cyber AB, and they got to follow ISO IE 17020. That's the standard for inspections.
Okay, so who trains the folks who actually carry out the assessments?
That's the CAICO, the CMMC Assessors and Instructors Certification Organization. Like the Cyber AB, there's only one at a time. They develop the training, give the exams, and certify the assessors. That's the CCA, CMMC Certified Assessor, and also CCP, CMMC Certified Professional. The CISE has to follow ISO IEC 17024, the standard for certifying people.
Got it. So we've got the Cyber AB watching the C3PAOs, the CAICO training the assessors, lots of acronyms flying around.
Lots of acronyms, that's for sure. And the assessors, the CCAs, those are the ones who can lead and do those level 2 assessments. They can be certified by the CIISO. The CCPs, they can help out with those assessments, but they got to be supervised by a CCA.
Are there any, background checks or qualifications these assessors need to have?
Oh, yeah, for sure. The proposed rule says certain people in those C3PAOs and the CIISO, they got to go through background checks, tier 3 level or similar. Shows you how seriously they're taking this, the kind of information involved. It's all about trust and knowing who you're dealing with.
Makes sense. So all this information, the assessments, all that, is it all going into some kind of central system?
Yep. They're using EMAN-S, the Enterprise Mission Assurance Support Service. It's a system the DoD already uses to manage cybersecurity info. With CMMC, this is where those C3PAOs upload all their assessment results, all the documentation. It's like the central repository for everything.
Okay, so let's talk about actually getting certified. What does a contractor need to do to go through this process?
All right, so it depends on the level you're aiming for. Level 1 is all about self-assessment. You check yourself against the level 1 requirements. Some level 2 contracts, we talked about those. Some can do self-assessment too with that yearly affirmation on SPRS. But others at level 2 need a third-party assessment by a C3PAO. Level 3, that's the big one. It's a government assessment done by the DCMA, DIBCAC, Defense Contract Management Agency's Defense Industrial Base Cybersecurity Assessment Center. But you can't even go for level 3 until you've got that level 2 certification.
So walk me through it. What happens when a company needs level 2 and has to go through a C3PAO?
Okay, so you find a C3PAO that's been approved by the Cyber AB. You sign a contract with them. They come in, do the assessment against the level 2 requirements. When they're done, they upload everything to that CMMC instance of EMASS. If you pass, you get a certificate, good for 3 years usually.
And you said level 3 builds on that level 2.
Yep. You have to get through that level 2 final certification assessment on all the systems that are in scope for the level 3 assessment. Only then can you go for the level 3 assessment, which is that government-run one by DCMA DIBCAC. And just like level 2, that level 3 certification lasts for 3 years.
Okay, so what happens if a company gets assessed and they don't meet every single requirement? Any way to fix that?
Yeah, they have something called POANMs, plans of action, and milestones. They can use them in certain situations for both level 2 and level 3. But there are rules. It's not a free pass. For level 2 self-assessments, if you have a POANM, you usually get about 180 days to implement everything and close out all those gaps. For the C3PAO assessments at level 2 and the government assessments at level 3, there are also deadlines for fixing those POANMs. And for level 3, you only get a POANM if your initial score is high enough and if the things you're missing aren't those super critical security requirements.
Okay, you mentioned scoring earlier. How do they actually measure if a contractor is compliant or not?
So for level 2, each requirement is looked at one by one. You either meet it, partially meet it, or don't meet it at all. And they have a point system. Different requirements are worth different points. To get certified at level 2, you got to hit a certain minimum score. Level 3 is a bit simpler. Before they even start the assessment, you have to have all those level 2 requirements fully implemented, the ones that are in scope for the level 3 assessment. Your level 3 score then just reflects how many of the specific level 3 requirements you meet.
This is pretty in-depth. While they were developing CMMC, were there any major concerns or questions that came up? How did the DoD respond?
You bet there were. One big worry was the impact on small businesses. A lot of them were worried about the cost, the resources needed to get certified. So the DoD made some changes, like allowing self-assessment for all of level 1 and some level 2 contracts. They also made a point of highlighting resources for small businesses, things like the DoD Office of Small Business and Technology Partnerships. And especially for companies involved in those SBIR and STTR programs, the Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer programs, those are often how smaller companies get their foot in the door with the DoD.
That's good to hear. What about international companies? Say a company outside the U.S. is a subcontractor for a U.S. prime. What happens then?
Oh, that's a tricky one. Lots of people asked about that. What rules apply to those international subs? How can they enforce CMMC outside the U.S.? There were even reports of some foreign governments telling their companies not to accept those CMMC requirements from U.S. primes. It's a tough nut to crack, for sure. And the DoD has admitted it's difficult to make CMMC work internationally while also respecting other countries' rules. Makes
sense. What if a contractor disagrees with an assessment? Can they appeal it?
Yeah, there's a process for that. They call it the appeals process now. Yeah. It's a multi-level thing following those ISO IEC standards. First, if you have a problem with the C3PAO's assessment, you go to them directly. If you can't work it out, you can escalate it to the Cyber AB, the accreditation body, and their decision is final. And if you have a problem with the CMMC level required for a contract, you take that up with the contracting officer.
Okay, so what if a company has already done other cybersecurity assessments? They've invested in that already. Will CMMC recognize any of those?
In some cases, yes. The DoD said they'll accept, under certain conditions, those high assessments done by DCMA DIBCAC if they were done using NIST SP 800-171 Revision 2. That would count as a Level 2 certification. And they also recognize FedRAMP Moderate or higher for cloud providers used by defense contractors. But they lay out all the details and conditions for this in the proposed rule. It's not automatic.
Sounds like the DOD has been putting in the work to get everyone on board with CMMC.
Oh yeah, definitely. Tons of meetings, workshops, info sessions, you name it. They've been working with industry groups, universities, even other government agencies. Their CMMC website, that's dodto.defense.go, CMMC. It's like their main hub for everything. Yeah. CMMC, FAQs, guidance documents. You can even contact them directly with questions. They've been trying to be as open and responsive as possible. You got to give them that.
Right on. The proposed rule also mentioned costs. What are we looking at here?
Trying to figure out how much CMMC will cost overall is pretty tough. Depends on a lot of things, like how many companies need to get assessed at each level, how big and complex those companies are, the regulatory impact analysis that comes with the proposed rule. It has all these tables, breaking down the estimated costs for both contractors and the government over 20 years. They factor in the cost of assessments, reporting for level 3, even the cost of putting new security controls in place. One thing to remember, the cost estimates for levels 1 and 2, they mostly focus on the assessment itself and the yearly affirmation and SPRS. Since those security requirements, they were basically already there.
So looking at the big picture, CMMC is a pretty huge change in how the DoD handles cybersecurity, right? I mean, it's all about verifying security practices, making sure things are actually happening, not just being talked about. They've got this tiered system. The level you need depends on the information you're dealing with. And then this whole new world of organizations to do the assessments. It's all to make the defense industry stronger, make sure that sensitive information is protected, especially with all the cyber threats out there.
That's the gist of it. You nailed it. Now you've got a solid understanding of what CMMC is all about, the different parts, the people involved. Should give you a good foundation for navigating all this.
And that brings us to our final thought for all of you listening. This CMMC thing is a big undertaking, right? It's going to cost money, take time, and effort to get the whole defense industry up to speed. So the question is, what will the long-term effects be? Will it slow down innovation? Will it hurt competition, especially for smaller companies trying to break in? It's a balancing act, making sure the country's safe, but also keeping the defense industry strong and dynamic.
Great point to consider. And if you want to really dig into the weeds on CMMC, check out the DoD's website. That's dodtod.defense.go/CMMC. And look at the Federal Register dockets. They're number DoD 2023 OS DO0063 and DoD 2023 OS 00096. Those have all the details of the proposed rule, and you can even submit comments if you want to. The CMC website also has a bunch of guidance documents and FAQs, so yeah, lots to explore.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.